It's a privilege and also honor for me to, introduce Fatima Shahnaz to you. She's a great friend of Lamakaan and also a dear friend of mine. And she has given numerous talks at Lamakaan and also conducted some night schools on women empowerment, gender sensitivity, and so on. And for the first time, I didn't know this side of her, that she has written poems, and that too on a very sensitive subject like Pulwama's episode. So I think without further ado, since we are already late, I'm going to hand over the mic to Dr. Fatima Shahnaz. She is also in turn going to introduce her friends who are all lined up to read the poetry. Yeah, over to Fatima.
Good evening, Assalamu alaikum, adabars, namaskar. Thank you for all of you for being here and for coming to this very important topic. It's, I think, a commitment and a national, almost a duty, because I think that we cannot forget these incidents in our country. Anyhow, it's not how many people there are, it's the quality of people. And I'm very honored to be here amongst you. Also, I'd like to thank Lamakaan, who has been hosted some of my very controversial talks. And I seem to always... Hello? What's that?
It's all right.
What was that?
Some fruits are falling from...
Yeah, there are no stone pelters.
Well, I'll go and kill somebody. It's okay. Don't worry. Yeah, I'm not afraid of stone pelters. Anyway. Listen, guys, if you can stand up for the Indian Army, I don't think you're afraid of anything. Am I right? Yeah, right? Yeah. Anyway, now, the point is, I wanted to say that Lamakaan has been wonderful in hosting so many of my talks and poetry and so on. And I'd particularly like to say that Naeem has literally, I think, he's sacrificed his life to upholding this institution. I mean, he is the life of the party. And that's why you saw all of us here laughing so much, because when you're with your friends in an intellectual elite, I think that you have that camaraderie, and that's why we were smiling, although the topic of these poems is quite tragic. I am equally honored to have such friends who are sitting here. Dr. Pravan of the Birla Academy, who is a brilliant scientist, and I think the future of this country. Alec Bailey, who is a Shakespearean clown, and a Shakespearean clown is actually a Greek oracle, because he's a truth teller, and he is our wise man. So Alec is a stand-up comic. He's multi-talented. He's a professor of psychology. He's a poet. And he's absolutely incredibly inspiring to be with, as are all my friends here. Sonia? She is a poet in Urdu and in English. She is a brilliant poet in Urdu. You have to have her show alone. And her ghazals are beautiful. And she is truly living, I think, the poetic life. Ankur, whose name means seedling. Now, Ankur, I don't really know what you do, but you can say...
I am a physics student and a poet.
Aha, he's a poet and a physics student. So as you see, I know he's a poet, but I didn't know about the physics side. And he's also a physics professor, professor and a PhD and so on. So anyway, as you see, this team here is wonderful. I'm honored that they have offered to read my poems, which no longer belong to me because they're your property. They're now public property. You can stone me if you like. It doesn't matter because the book is no longer mine. Yes. I disown the book. It is now the public. And all of you, well, they're going to read, and they read what they feel like reading. So thank you again, and enjoy the show, and let's hope that our country doesn't forget this incident, because I don't think any of us here have really recovered from it, and I don't think we forget. Anyhow, let me talk to you about Khaki, the book, why I wrote this book, and I'll try to be brief on the introduction. The reason I wrote this book was that, as you saw, and you may have read in the back, it's a shock. It was a shock. But it was a shock to our system. It was a wake-up call. We in India have been infighting for centuries. We're a polarized society. And then suddenly we have a common cause, which sort of unites us. And in this common cause, there can be no compromise, in the sense that I read something here from Hannah Arendt, who I've quoted at the beginning of the book. And she says, never react to an evil in such a way as to augment it. So we have to react to an evil and stop it. The second thing I'd like to read from is the Bhagavad Gita, where Arjuna, as you know, in the Mahabharata, in the Gita, is urged by Krishna to take a stand. And this is really what Pulwama, this book is about. This book is about taking a stand in the face of evil. Taking in the stand in the face of the preservation of the sanctity of human life, of humanitarianism. If we do not take a stand, then we have actually, I think, failed our mission. So in the Gita, as Paran, can you quote that? Read this line in Sanskrit. This one.
Yuddhaya Kratanishchaya.
Yeah.
No. Okay. Yeah. It says Yuddhaya Kratanishchaya.
Oh, yeah. Well, say what it says. Krishna spurs Arjuna.
Krishna spurs Arjuna into war, saying, if you get wounded in the war, you would attain heaven. If you are victorious, you would rule the earth. So rise and fight the war.
That's what it is. This is what the Gita says about commitment. Now, we are fighting about Pulwama. It is a war in India, in Kashmir. But when you look at the bigger picture, which is what these poems are about, it's about something far greater. It's a greater war. It is the war of justice and injustice. It is a global war. There are many wars across the world. And this is what Pulwama is about. So in this book, there are several phases of grieving. The first is the shock. The second is the processing the whole incident. The third is a sense of commitment. The fourth, the sense of injustice, the mourning, the grieving, the sadness of the nation. Then the coming together of the sense that of we are one, and through our oneness we heal, our healing. And I think the last phase, one of the last phase, is that the whole world is Pulwama. So the book transcends just the Pulwama incident and becomes poetry about a more universal order. And my inspiration for this was the Indian freedom struggle. Because I saw in the freedom struggle poets like Rabindranath Tagore and Sarojini Naidu and poets like that who wrote about, who were united in their cause. And I sought that sort of pre-partition unity of our people. I wanted that sense of unity, because after partition, there was disunity and chaos and polarization. And I wanted that wonderful transcendent unity we had with independence, where Sarojini Naidu wrote poetry, which was patriotic, where Rabindranath Tagore wrote, "Into that land of freedom, O Lord, let my country awake." So these were poets who inspired me and I loved. And I think that the mystical core of India is something that cannot be destroyed. It is beyond elections. It is beyond political parties. It is beyond the individual ego. What we, at least in these poems, what I feel is the preservation of a humanity, and which is international, universal, transcendent. And for me, India has always represented that core. And believe me, when I've met people in Delhi, in Hyderabad, across India, I have met people who are goodness. Even though there is political propaganda on every side, but I think the core of our country is something that gives me tremendous hope. So in these poems, as you will read The Deccan Soil, and all of you will read different poems, I go through the phases of anger, outrage, shock, and then finding that belief in something magnificent that we have to save. So I will start with the first poem. Working? First poem, Khaki. It's called In the Springtime. February, spring just around the corner, the road to Pulwama ablaze in the shock and awe brilliance of a khaki dawn. Under a dank, overcast sky, tarpaulin grey and gasoline air, mustard shoots crack the icy sod mouth. The buckshot of Kashmir's symbolic chinar leaves lie in smatterings of wasted lives. Youth's meteor race to chaos, trapped in time's slippery moraine. Under Himalayan reefs, burgeoning pods of spring unfurl impending darkness. Lumbering bus convoys of war-fatigued sleepy soldiers with crater eyes, vacant as bombed-out shelters, glacial, wintry trenches, a spiraling avalanche of memories, old war stories to be retold over home fires and hearths for avid generations, best forgotten like the unfolding dystopian battlefields of a black and white videoscape of World War I movies devoid of romanticism. Distended, ruptured etchings in the faded digital residue of foregone lives. A mother's doleful gaze sweeps a vanished son's photograph. A widow garlanding a casket of the homecoming warrior in the body bag. A visual whiteout in defunct destiny's spectral face. Behind the unsheathed talons of a bomber on the road, maddened by the vitriol of revenge, broken by torture and humiliation, a lost soul, a drifter, a terrorist, an automated killing machine, triggerman, just cannon fodder for those who keep their hands clean, making a derelict an easy prey to execute their black ops, dirty business of murder and mayhem. The psyche of a suicide bomber is a fault line in the historic narrative, an oubliette of faceless shadows, expendable, anonymous. Terrorism has no religion, the axiom goes. But hate is. Exploitation is. Man's binary us or them feeding frenzy and othering of those who differ is. In this grisly clutter of the killing business, the debris and detritus of warfare, warriors dreaming of going home, skirting avenues of mulberry trees, funereal misted pines, strafed by wintry fingers, jogging in dusty convoys of antiquated transportation, obsolete weaponry, low pay, arduous service that fated day on the road to Pulwama. The soul of India beckons, radiant as butterflies, as the green fields of Punjab, Haryana, Jharkhand, Uttarakhand, Chhattisgarh, Assam, and northeast borderlands, the gravitational pull homewards in the lilting breath of Bengal, tamarisk hues of Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, and verdant Kerala, the perfumed palm of Delhi, the fecund delta of Yamuna and Ganga, birthing a Ganga Jamuni osmosis of cultures, a coalescence of antiquity and better tomorrows, the unison of voices in harangue like celestial choirs of a jeweled island, Mani Dvipa, a village, a city, a heavenly abode, my India. The logo of a rickshawala, a fisherman, a dhobi washerman on the Musi escarpment of the medieval city of Hyderabad, its scimitar minarets, its postcard horizon of a magical Byzantine domain, and the opaque underbelly of boom towns of affluence and urbanization, the cloying offal of conscience, a scabby human scavenger clamoring from a sewage tank caked in fetid excrement. No virtual Bollywood movie shot from Slumdog Millionaire. These children, brain dead from malnutrition, are no poster kids of a celebrity culture, often deprived of a single basic meal a day, a week, a glass of milk, a weekly egg possibly, at schools of defunct welfare schemes and societal dysfunctions. Empty bellies, counting star galaxies to sleep through another water crisis, the lack of hydroelectric power in swaths of forgotten regions and leached riverbeds, girls bereft of education, a female laborer at a construction site carrying stones under a searing sun, halting to breastfeed a baby. Why do they covet us this? We who die a million deaths a day, a million hearts broken in a maelstrom of deprivation, yet still the unvanquished glimmer of hope shines through my India of a billion hearts. Warriors dreaming of wavering fortress towers at sundown, the old Deccan meandering on the caravanserai road to Maharashtra, traversed by Arab traders, Persian scholars, Turkics and European adventurers, linguists of Deccani Urdu and Northern Hindavi, the ancient language, Telangana's undulating hills, and emerald lakes pumping the nation's axle wheels at the centrifugal point where the IT hub and rivers meet, the briny breezes of coastal Andhra, the fish harvesters of Visakhapatnam and Cochin, Malayalam and balmy islands of the Indian Ocean, the Arabian Sea and Bay of Bengal, the northern, southern beacons of continental Indian landmass, flashing laser beams like a stellar lighthouse, deep in the hearts of 40 navigators of the oceanography of this nation, all its hues and multitudes mirrored in the brave hearts, making the ultimate sacrifice in the line of duty. The 22-year-old boy at the dawn of youth, vaporized on the suicide mission of a maniac, a young life blindsided before his blossoming dreams, now a heap of broken cartilage and fractured hopes amid skeletal trucks blasted into human braziers, rank with russet ash and blood, grime, gore, the oozing bone splinters of 40 stalwarts in the spring of life, mustard fields littered with body parts like shriveled smatterings of pistachio, and chinar leaves on the road to Pulwama, Kashmir, on that fated day in the springtime. Blood spraying nature's chemically peeled face, the teething mouth of lost innocence, mangled in a holocaust of metal wreckage, charred flesh and steel reeking of death's marrow, etherized fragments of a memory tape forgotten in the synapses of history where dead warriors go. Where do they go, our heroes, our Iliads, our Mahabharatas, Arjuna and Krishna on the chariot wheels of Dharma? Where do they go, our martyrs of Nahjul Balaga, Imam Ali's exhortation that no warrior attacks the defenseless? Where do they go, our Geneva Conventions, our ethics, our nuclear deterrence, our Westphalian doctrines of international law and peace, our civilized conscience? Where do they go, the protesters and dissidents, the free thinkers and intellectuals murdered for asking the questions? Mercy and innocence roiling, a nation in mourning for 40 slain martyrs on the road to Pulwama, that fated day, in flowering saffron and pistachio fields, radiant butterflies, immortality in their wings spread, beckon from the valley of death and despondency, India's soul awakens in the springtime.
Very well written. Very, very interesting and very... So the one that I'm reading, it's on page number 20. It's called Fear. One thing which is very interesting with Dr. Fatima Shahnaz's writing is the brave use of the metaphor. And the good thing about her use of the metaphor is she uses the way a poet should use metaphor, which is very rare in the age that we are living in. Because it takes a certain amount of learning and audacity at the same time. And because poet is always the other and always the observer who's writing for and being in the society, it becomes interesting to look at these poems and reflect on what we are doing with ourselves. The poem that I'm going to read has reminded me of two other poets. Cheesewolf Miwosh's poem called Poor Christian Looks at the Ghetto, and Adonis's poem called War, because they were written in almost the similar times of totalitarianism and despotism and jingoism that we are living in right now. The poem is called Fear. Fear hides its agate eyes like a girl behind the grills of a burqa, shivering like a moth dancing too close to the flame. The faceless stalker, the rapist, the hidden killer in the bed cast his predatory shadows. No time for appeasement or negotiation now, no compromise or dancing with the devil. The line in the sand is drawn. Which side are you on? The nation seething Leviathan chews the umbilical cord of darkness. The enemies at the gate inhibiting the orifices of your head inside the prism of your worldviews. No time for discombobulation, disorientation. The bullet in your brain leaves no space for remembering invisible tomorrows.
Is leave us to God or the devil. The page number is 38. The pachyderm plods on seeking greener pastures beyond the barriers of man's brutal adventures, the lust to possess or destroy what he cannot own or trample over. The Mahatma's clarion call rings across a millennium, tentatively unifying the split races, Hindus and Muslims, hawks and pacifists, exhorting a freak show, cable of ghoulishness, subversives, agitators, rogue entities, state or non-state players, warmongers and hate propagandists, one-word dictatorships, zero-growth demographers, merchants of death and their cursed ilk. Leave us to God or the devil, but for God's sake, you get out. Long after the founding fathers are gone and ancestral voices are silent as hawks in the night, the lumbering elephant soul searches. Is he out of the woods yet, or had his myopic old mammoth brain failed to see the wood for the trees?
Realistically, what's happening with us today is because we live in a world of instant gratification, an event of this magnitude creates a buzz. People talk about it, people come out on the streets, people make noise about it. But our memories are so short-lived that we go back to the comforts of our life. And so happily we go back, it's as if it never happened. Except for those people whose lives have been singed by the fire started at that moment. So I'm going to read one of my pieces, which Dr. Shahnaz has been kind enough to.
Yes, your piece.
So if that's okay with, fair enough. So this piece it's not from the book, it's a piece that I was scribbling when I looked at the book. It says, "This is some of us. I am from Delhi. A few streets from my office, some beings stand in clusters with cigarettes between their clenched fists, phones set to selfie mode. They pass out candles supposed to be lit with lighters more accustomed to orange glowing tobacco sticks. They struggle trying to light them through the sands of time, making sure you could see them. Things come to order and they call a CRPF brat to speak of their pain. I hear her whisper of the beauty of death, service and sacrifice, pandering to the emotion of the collective audience that has never sacrificed. Strong statements of shahadat, martyrdom, desh prem run strong, a mistake I regret fiercely. Because you can only truly be a martyr legally if you're in the army. Quietly followed by a prayer, a moment of silence that is gently punctuated with clicking of cameras and the sands of time silently extinguishing the candles held up again and again. Well, time's up, photo op's over. Now go home, enjoy the likes and comments. 40 deaths would easily translate to 40 lakh likes and a few honest souls scarred forever. Till next time, when we will light each other's candles again and again and again as many times as there's another Pulwama. This is some of us.
No, you have to read now.
Sure. And then it'll come back to me.
Oh,
Right, so I'm reading from page number 13. The piece is called India Burns. I picked one of yours.
it's so incredible. It's moving me and it's upsetting me. So I can't remember.
Page number 13, the piece is called India Burns. India burns like a tiger, prowling in barkish darkness. No scavenger for pittance morsels of pity, this noble mammoth, nor chattering hyena. No graveyard buzzard, but a predator. But a predatory, feral giant defining its territory. Its cosmography amidst stars. India looms from the deserts of Rajasthan and Kutch, Kashmir's earthly paradise, and the ferments of its multitudes in the maze of adversity. Primal eyes see a forest of chaos, kneeling like a broken reed in the wind, as the ragged dogs of war slash at the incoherent fabric of humanity.
So as you mentioned, this is not just about Pulwama. So this piece that I found is also about the aftermath of something like Pulwama. The kind of factions that an event like this inevitably creates. So it's called vigilantes. Already, page number 33. Already Muslims have disappeared from this erstwhile Muslim-dominated city, burrowed away in segregated apartment blocks, cubby holes, like Buddhist caves carved out of the rugged cliffs of Bamiyan, Afghanistan, the fortress cities of terror eerily resonant of the Warsaw Ghetto, where Jews fled from the Nazi final solution under the Third Reich, the expedient culling of the human herd called ethnic cleansing. Is there a way to hide a blot on human conscience or euphemize a Holocaust? Must we speak in lowered voices and hushed tones like ancient Christians thrown to the lion's den? Is it a historic irony that Mein Kampf is a bestseller nowhere but in India? Muslims are strangely muted in this city of joys and festivals, city of brides, city of pearls. They call us southern Hyderabad. Now invisible, barricaded behind iron curtains of fear of the impending backlash, the retaliatory domestic strikes unleashed in deserted streets and abandoned storefronts. Unappeased rage needs to find an enemy image, someone to blame for failures, or the deep coiled insecurity snaking in, the psychic template of the vigilante stalker who evades gangs in the street in broad daylight. The real terrorists holed up in a basement somewhere and with swaggering panache goes home to batter his wife.
The towns and villages and rural homes shut down. They say the enemy is at the gate. The age of bunkers and stockpile possess, gun caches, sleeper cells, and hoarding is here. Who sees the enemies turning inward? The monster of self-consuming hate devouring itself. Who is safe inside his own eyes, the ghettoized biases inside his head? Why are these deserted streets of Srinagar, Kashmir, ghost towns under lifetimes of curfews? Who dares risk stepping out of the turbid maze of vendettas of partition, the spiderwebs of fear, into the moonless landscape of a shadowless eclipse?
Is 11, page 11. It's called, yes, this one I've had to fight for because they wouldn't surrender this poem. But I fought for this poem. I'm going to read it. Home is the warrior. And the style of this poem breaks away from the free verse of the other style. This one is deliberately written in like a ballad because this is how people would welcome a warrior. Home is the warrior. A homage to Wing Commander Abhinandan Varthaman, POW captured after an aerial dogfight in India's retaliatory strikes on terrorists. I'm not even speaking to this. Terrorists following Pulwama and released on March 3rd, 2019 under international pressure. I quote at the beginning of this poem Ludwig Wittgenstein. Ethics must be a condition of the world like logic. Ethics. Home is the hero, home from the sky. In Bharat today, not a dry eye. The speedometer of Abhinandan's valiant spirit flew faster than the F-16 his Mirage 21 Bison hit. Eddying and spinning in a death dive on landing, his captors beat and blindfolded him, but he stood tall again. He swallowed the maps of strategic information like a circus bear. They paraded him in humiliation. To break the will of the Indian nation, they violated Geneva Conventions against torture of prisoners of war, attempting to break India's spine, but unswervingly did Bharat soar. Home, our boy, miraculously alive, intrepid warrior, fighting so a nation could survive. Home is the brave heart from the ugly fog of war. Like a falling star, he landed at the hostile's door. No guts, no glory, the gladiator's home from hell's gate, from the bestiality and carnage of man's relentless hate. No compromise nor cowardice. Abhinandan, you chose death over surrender, your laurels to the nation you so proudly render. As you return from the grave, your motherland's gratitude is boundless. A country's love surfeits, you rank amidst the ageless. We, the living, are your pantheon, your name etched in annals of glory. Generations will remember you, your effigy carved in history. Your action shall echo with the Greek Achilles, Hector of Troy of antiquity. Iliads will be written about Naya India's rising sun. You, warrior, are Mother India's valiant son. Humbled, we embrace this gift of your life. No greater virtue there is than a patriot's sacrifice. Who can restrain tears, seeing the trauma in your eyes? Your battered body stands erect as an Ashoka tree as you smile on Indian skies. Across our cities, it's a day of exaltation, collectively as a people, standing together, hailing a great nation. Dalit, Sikh, Muslim, Hindu, Christian, Parsi, Jain, Buddhist, Adivasi, women. Our diversity is our consolidation. Homecoming soldier, your flesh wounds will heal, knowing under duress that your honor none could steal. Our memories forever wear your emblazoned badge of valor. Seeing you walk through prison gates into our sultry Indian night was as bedazzling as the aura of Ram's cosmic light. What was your perspective from those transcendent heights? What flags unfurl within your heart-shining sights? What are your thoughts alone after the jubilations when you divest your hero's crown, your martyr's medals, your rose garlands and adulations? Will you teach the brutes and barbarians the end game and...
That's just a fruit. There are no stone bells.
They are fruits that fall from heaven.
We will teach the brutes and barbarians. Will you teach the brutes and barbarians the end game and meaning of history, that all men must learn the lesson of equanimity and pity? Will you take up the banner of ultimate triumph in clemency? Will you show Ram's bow of justice hits the fires of the heart of universal ethics? Will you let them know that the great battlefield, the jihad, is within, that man's worst enemy is himself, killing humanity, his greatest sin?
Wow. Wonderful. The good thing I like is the way you listed women in the last thing. You put women in the last. This is a very subtle sarcasm.
Which one?
This one.
Yes.
Very subtle sarcasm.
Thank you all so much. I had to read that poem because you know what I mean. I mean, by the way, when I said to you we were in mourning, I wrote this poem almost in tears because I was desperate at that point. We didn't know. We saw Abhinandan coming out of the gate. Now, bad people say, this was all staged, this was choreographed, this is not true. I don't care if it's true or not true. It is the feeling that matters. It is the feeling that brought us together as Indians. You know, why are we bickering over, the elections or this or that? It's not important. What is important is the pain in the mother's eyes, the wife that was waiting for him. I mean, all this is what we are talking about, you know? I mean, for me, anyway, there's a poem here on Kashmir if somebody wants to read it. And they'll understand what I'm talking about. Kashmir, about humanity. And here you go, page 23. You're going to read 24/7, huh? Anyway, Kashmir, the point again, as I said, transcendent values. Values that cross boundaries and frontiers, that values that are beyond us and them. That's the point of Kashmir, this poem. This poem is, we have forgotten, as Alex said, we have forgotten the humanitarian disaster because everyone is fighting for Kashmir. But we have forgotten about the people of Kashmir. They have become just pawns. You know, the tree hates me. I don't think it likes poetry, my poetry especially. I mean, God, this tree does not like these poems. Oh, it's offering seedlings? Encore?
It's all showering flowers.
It's flowers, it's like stones, seriously. Anyway, it's a sense of reality. We are getting stoned here. But anyway, Kashmir, we forget the people. We forget the humanitarian disaster, you know. So this poem is, I guess, you're just completely out of the political arena. Kashmir. The guttering flares of Kashmir's villages in limbic riverbeds erased from geological maps, the universal barriers of conventions, of crimes, on crimes against humanity, like vacillating mountain crests or melting icy stalactites in the chokehold of an impending genocidal avalanche. Another baby killer war on the reefs of Hindu Kush and Everest shaved flanks. Women and infants bartered for land and guns, stupefied, blinded civilians in the blurry fog of military maneuvers and faceless combat, squadrons vanishing in the primordial ruins of catacombs and colosseums, scarred with vestiges of foregone flourishing cities, snowy peaks bristling with the stony, jagged skylines of bitter memories. And in this ragged necropolis, etchings of the dust of history, like shards of pottery shaped in an artisan's gentle hands, kitchen utensils once nurturing a family in a primeval Neolithic age lie twisted in the smoldering skeletal debris of tanks. The tentacles of virtual death lose the anchored reality and moral compass of truth. And in the ceaseless monotony of jackboots, an ethereal Himalayan range, once inhabited by primordial gods, is encircled by the prison houses of mental cages. A gulag of humanity cowers behind craters of fear. The cracked skulls of shelled homes, threading the woof of Kashmir's filigreed embroidery of inspired races. The skilled craftsmanship and cottage industries of carpet weavers in time's silken strands, and papier-mâché painters whose brushstrokes spin beauty with horsehairs, lie shredded under arsenals of lethal military hardware as the terrorist creeps under the mattress of poor, befuddled villagers like a snake in the grass, a murderer in the night, smothering the psyche of a captive people.
I think this is a good continuation of the previous poem, right? The same page, 23. 24/7. 24/7, the wailing starts. 24/7, the news barrage. 24/7, the 22-year-old boy in a cavalcade of hearses contemplates the trajectory of his death-bound mortuary in a wintry wasteland. The icy road to Pulwama bleeds in the boy's gaze, scoping mountain embankments where ghosts of his futures lurk dank as the shadowy stubble on his cheeks, the receding hairline of coniferous forests, and youth's dreams detonating grenades and shrapnel. 24/7, the charred furnaces of gasoline and metal bonfires, fractured body parts and cartilage claw at the collective memory of a benumbed nation. 24/7, an Indian mother scans the pyres of truncated limbs for residual relics of the progeny of her own placebo, reading the subliminal signals of death on the pixels of a television screen, wore as sanitized as glossy photographic evidence, no more than crumpled paper in the trash bin of death's abstraction. An old woman's heart is cordoned off and sealed behind invisible green lines and international peacekeepers. Somewhere amidst Punjab's lost sons, or Bengals, or Kerala's, Tamil Nadu's, or anywhere, India, the mothers await skin-scorched boys in body bags. 24/7, reliving the nightmare of the millennial memory tape of the engines of birthing, entropy, and despair. 24/7.
It goes do and die. And it has a quote from Lord Alfred Tennyson: "Theirs not to reason why, theirs but to do and die." Who would have thought the predictions of a soothsayer on the way to the forum in ancient Rome foresaw the Ides of March, or Cassandra, the Trojan priestess' visionary hallucinogenic prophecy of Troy's ruin, might sketch the dark chronicles of epics, and that this foresight would come to pass, or that the millennials of the 21st century would hear the drumbeats of avenging, bloodlusting war gods, that gin, next huddled over cyber cocoons, too abstract to decrypt democracy's hacked narratives and distortions, or the war stratagems of the great Mahabharata being played in a theatre, far from the video games and pizza parlors of Saturday night chill-outs. Who would have thought that homes will be demolished and atomized, sundering families with sectarian polarizations, communal dissensions, misogyny and hate crimes rearing their ugly heads from the gutters and cesspools of men's hearts? And if they happen to ride a two-wheeler crossing a deserted street at night, maybe a hapless Muslim youth in a skull cap walking on the wrong side of the street, murdered by seething vigilantes roaming neighborhoods armed for battle, killing their own citizenry. The young boys and girls out late in the night are unsuspecting that their homes might be gutted and they themselves the collateral damage of other people's wars. Home is where the heart is, squelched in the puddle of hate, where saffron and red bleed into the ethnographic coloring of othering. Home is where the throbbing heartbeat of India lies, mangled in a grave of the distorted narrative of civil strife, where ancestors awaken in tombs to the cataclysm roar of weaponry and dead youth.
I'm reading for page number 32, Snowballing Violence. Page number 32, Snowballing Violence. Blood will have blood. Hate begets hate. A region and its people hung suspended in time's skittish pendulum on pinwheels of violence and unquenched hatred. The saw teeth of Himalayas shove with unrequisite adversities, snowballing, spiraling out of control till they've lost in the graveyard, snow crest of an unrecaptable Eden. On the rooftops of the world's memories of spiritual beauties unremembered.
Like, when I opened this book, this is the first poem that I said, I'm going to read it, I'm claiming it. The description on the backside of the book describes the poems as unabashedly patriotic. And what I find constant throughout your poems is that while they are patriotic, they're not the patriotism of, they're not the postured patriotism of today, which is very political and very sectarian. It's the patriotism of our childhood. It's the patriotism of, you know, of what the people who created this country might have seen, which you were talking about in the beginning also. Yes. What holds India together apart from, you know, political parties and infighting. Okay, so it's called The Deccan Soil. Having clutched a clod of Deccan earth in my palm, having crossed a stranger in a rickshaw in a crowded Delhi bazaar, having strolled among milling swarms in Connaught Place, appraising imperial Victorian columns in the sunshine of free India, having yelled with lumpen riffraff at Jantar Mantar, merging my identity in the cauldron of Indian masses, blending in as love conjoins, having heard sing-song voices of Bengal, wafted like a petal in the wind in offerings of scented flowers in teeming Kolkata, having seen the indigo eye of Durga, the Bharatnatyam woman power of Kali over skulls of male subordinates, as earthy Tamil Nadu unfurls time's oracles, having felt the silken death ghats of Varanasi in the flux of the river of the afterlife, having communed with ancients at all altars, plumbing the crib of sacred Ganges waters, having rebirthed in the fecund, verdant plains of Indus and Jamuna, the Krishna and the Brahmaputra, and trolled Sanskrit scrolls tumbling from eternity, having the verbs of rishis on my tongue, peers in the green cloth of Sufi saints of Kashmir, of Sikh chants and Zoroastrian fire temples of Bhakti and Krishna and the Nataraj dance of creation, I have felt the breath of roaming spiritual avatars channelizing my ancestry, having mined mystic secrets from Himalayan mountain flanks and tampered with love's timeless alchemy, having tasted forbidden fruits, lifting the taboos of races, so the heart's potential to love his other rears no fences nor shadows between us. Having yielded to love's lotus, transforming base instincts in a crystal ball of fantastical reverie, I am forged from the molten groin of Deccan soil at the crossroads of the galloping horsemen of time in the cosmopolitan crucible of civilizations, drinking from this amalgam of a Ganga Jamuni chalice of cultures. I have seen the blossoming from primal decay to illuminated brilliance, the soul reconnected at the source, the origin of all things. I have been humbled by a land where dead matter and clay metamorphose in the magical unraveling of stellar galaxies from the broken fragments of the human heart. This I can confirm with absolute certainty, having held a clod of Deccan earth in my palm and been awakened by love's startling clairvoyance. It's so different from all yours.
Here's one which is a little unusual. It's called The Peacock's Cry. It's called The Peacock's Cry. The peacocks cry in the jungle, shrubbery. A mule, a grating, throttled, screechy sound. Oh, sorry, page 25. The peacocks cry in the jungle, shrubbery. A mule, a grating, throttled, screechy sound, strange as a Tibetan organ or dissonant string instruments on remote mountain tops. As incongruence dazzling, an incongruence dazzling as death. Some see this iridescent bird as an omen of disaster. The peacock cried down in the garden of broken ruins and deserted Italianate fountains. The fowl was echoed by a distant other, a mate standing sentinel like a sibyl guarding Rome. Reunited, the long-lost lovers strutted about in a war dance like natives over tribal fires, their terrible, magnificent feathers unsheathed in glittering arrows, the treasure troves of nations in their bejeweled splendor, in the ruby crystal prism of their eyes, and glittering gems of paradise. They say the birds are cursed, the precursors of death, their incessant wailing harbingers, the aftermath of war, loss, and bereavement of cities, the prescience of onrushing carnages to come. Civilians huddle like sitting ducks on pond scum, avoidance and inertia defaulting action. Happily, they're oblivious to the mystery bird's swan song, parading its fantail in a death dance, cherry-picking its victims under the blitzkrieg of an inclement sun and cumulus banks of war clouds. Do not ask why death comes. Ask when.
Very well read.
Where are we now? Last few. Alec, have you got another one?
I think we should make it open and after that.
Yeah, well, the last, well, there are two final poems of the book, which are, no, they're important, no?
Yes.
Shall we?
You should read it.
Okay, this one. Are they going to throw stones again? Can I speak?
Which one is you?
Vande Mataram. Are they going to throw stones? Can I speak? Is the tree okay? Right. Vande Mataram. Naeem, with your permission. Thank you. Don't throw me out.
That went on record.
Everything's on record. It doesn't matter. You know, I think we'll confuse the critics. Which is the idea.
Yeah.
Shall we go? Okay. Vande Mataram. What? What did you say?
That's why my piece actually said orange cigarettes to be burned.
These are two kind of, a bit shorter, I think. Okay, Vande Mataram. A wave rumbling like Niagara Falls engulfed me. Like straw in a tempest, a biblical scourge, I was swept away in a giant tsunami, a seismic earth tremor. The death rattle of guns rumbled in my dreams, and hallucinating on ancient blood-spattered battlefields, groaning with detonating artillery, cannons and missiles. My dreams were strafed with the sporadic gunfire of snipers, the ricocheting bullets lodged in my memories database. Was I born to this? Was my birth preordained for this? Perpetual war, protracted hate? In streets around town, young men raise their arms crying, Vande Mataram, save our motherland. Angry youths and girls, infants and oldsters with walking sticks, in wheelchairs or just limping along in a melee of love and fear, outrage and wounded pride. And witnessing this debacle in my nation, history's freeze frame, stilted before me, I heard the calls to arms, pleas, appeals, sloganeering war cries. My heart sank in my ribcage, my solar plexus choked, and deep in the crib of Mother Earth, I fell into the crystal teardrop of a village woman scanning Punjab's green rice belts for the homecoming son, the unsung hero, never coming back. Scouring streets in ashes and sackcloth, the distraught mother cries out to the nation, are you in danger, my children? Why do our people moan and wail? I see fear in your eyes, tears in your souls, see your brave hearts break. I hear an anguished people cry the battle hymn, Vande Mataram. Glory for a son who never made it back to this side of the invisible borders of hate. I smile, proud and noble. He made the ultimate sacrifice, reaching the abode higher than Himalaya, touching the soul of Mother India, Vande Mataram. Those prepared to die salute you. Old women, girls, orphans, cripples, lepers risen from the grave, humbled we march in battalions, embracing with garlands of love your effigies etched in the lattice of eternity, singing our song of triumph and futures, midwives of motherhood and compassion, we, your champions, engendered from your primeval riverbeds, we who touch the legends of mythic snow-capped crests beyond the line of visibility where blue gods birthed, from the iconography of burnished temples and medieval mosques to the Kumbh Mela of your purifying waters, from Milky Ways and constellations of your celestial garments, from the diadems of honor, the tiara of history, we who wear the rainbow's sacred threads of your multiple races, creeds, and castes, we who chant your ode of pristine universes, unfurling gemstones of futures, we, your pillars, your fountainhead, your flowers, your lyrical epics, your archaic scriptures, build pantheons for life's sanctity, for planet Earth, for your great awakening, Mother India, Vande Mataram. And now the last one, which is equally awful, but emotional. Now this is another one, and you can imagine my condition by this time. I had collapsed. After this, that's why the book is thin, because I could not say any more. Anyway, Jai Bharat. May I stand for this? Sakyamuni walked along the path of peace, the moving caravan to serendipity, mourning man's lost soulfulness, his appetite and potential for evil. I do not accept the switchblade of your silence, thrust into the glittering astronomy of my conscience. If this is not the time to declare your colors, shout out for nation, country, motherland, people, when will you vocalize your integrity to your truths, self or place? When is the time ripe to raise a voice, if not in the face of a bleeding nation? Become man, adult, woman, Reclaim your democratic star constellations, your banners of multi-diversity, the plurality of your populations, bringing India out of mildewed closets, the stilted carapace of oblivion and cynical centuries festering in the serpentine tongues of hate and revenge, unswerving, unashamed or guilt-riddled at this juncture in time, this Lakshman Rekha to join the grand parade, embracing the sweltering heartbeats of this amalgamated miracle of humanity, these diamond facets of civilization's destiny, big words, to win greatness in the hearts and minds of the empyrean flares where India's sun rises. Bharat Jai, Jai Hind.
Wonderful. Couldn't be better.
Thank you. God bless you. Thank you. I said I came to India to die here. And this poem, this book, is like the meeting of the river, the great river of the humanity of India, the people of India. And I felt like, I think Alec might agree that when, or another poet, that when we write, each poem is like a little death, because you give so much of your soul to it. And for me, it was the greater soul of my country. And I felt like I'm being stoned from all sides. You know, that it's a no-win situation today. There's so much hate and anger. And I was like, just, you know, how a Roman death is they fall on their sword. They fall on their sword. It's like that kind of feeling that dharma, Raj Dharma, you know, that you have come to your country and you love it and you die for it and you die in it and you defend it. And yet, at the same time, that does not mean you lose your sense of humanitarian justice, which is even higher level than national boundaries, because they are spiritual boundaries that unify humanity. So India specifically, for me, India represents a nation that has, as you say, our childhood, that there is a purity of this country that has crossed all boundaries. And I don't want to mention politics here, but I do want to say one thing, that when I was in Delhi and I was all alone and I had no family, and I went to hospital, I was sick because I wasn't used to the food and so on. And the people who looked after me in the hospital, I had no family. They were saffron parties. They were pundits. They came to my hospital bed. And my doctor at that time, my Indian doctor, he said, I don't like these extremists. But they were there with me. What can I say? How can I hate any of this? You know, I'm the wrong person. You know, I mean, that's why I don't want to be in politics in that sense. Because, of course, I've taught political science, but to divide India, you know, to break up this land. Oh, there is a political poem there, by the way, very important political poem. Yes, the one about Thucydides, the one about democracy, and how in ancient Greece, after the Peloponnesian War, Thucydides was exiled because he attacked dictatorship and totalitarianism. And there's a poem on that. And he referred to the war in Corcyra, another place in Greece, which was a civil war. And because of that civil war, he warned the Greeks that if you don't respect democracy, this is what will happen to you. So there is a poem on that. Thank you.